So good morning, everyone, and welcome to the last day of the Charleston Conference. It's nice to see who the true Charleston champions are hanging in till Friday. My name is Betsy Donahue, and I run a small consultancy company called Donahue Knows, and I'm here representing one of my clients, Clear Skies. Speaking of which, we have a really interesting announcement on LinkedIn today. Another publisher has joined our list of publishers, so check it out when you have a minute. But first and foremost, thank you for joining the sessions today. The innovation session is really exciting. We've got a couple speakers here that I'd like to introduce at the start. So 3 presentations today, including 2 here in person and 1 remote, joining us remotely. We have Peter Brantley, who is the Director, Online Strategy at the University of California, Davis, joined by James English, who is the Director, Business Development at Lyrasis, so they'll be speaking first. And they'll be presenting expanding access to digital books through Lyrasis's Palace project. Next up, we have Andre Gall, Managing Director at EMS Press, and Kumas Bowling, Director of Publications at SciAm. And they'll be presenting equitable access through united effort, practical approaches to the ADA with a focus on mathematics. And then finally, we have our last speaker joining us remotely. He is Kyle Courtney, and he's the Director of Copyright and Information Policy at Harvard University. And his presentation is titled, Beam Me a Book, Virtual Access Rooms under Section 108 of the Copyright Act. Each presentation is 10 minutes long, and we'll be saving questions till the end. So please and thank you, just hold on to them and we'll cover them all at the end. And then it's over to you, Peter and James, so if you could join me here on the podium. So the slides are in PDF, so you just have to arrow down to get your next slide. It's a little, doesn't pull the whole slide.
Okay.
So it'll be fun.
Okay, thanks. Technical challenges. All right, thanks for joining us. We appreciate the opportunity to talk about our work together. This talk is about efforts to advance the Lyrasis software, the Palace project, into an academic library market. And that transition helps showcase some of the opportunities that we have to streamline operations more broadly across a broader range of libraries, as well as how to advance open standards in the library space. So it's a really nice point of fulcrum for the broader community. So just skipping that. Okay, so the Palace project originally arose out of work at New York Public Library. And New York Public Library's challenge was that they were subscribing to a wide range of digital content from a vast or very heterogeneous array of sources, right? We're all familiar with having to help instruct our readers to accommodate Overdrive or 3M Cloud Library or Hoopla. And so NYPL, given the size of its patrons audience, decided that they wanted to spend some effort to try to simplify the process of acquisition and reading digital content for their community. And so a different layer was conceived that was essentially an intermediary layer that would absolve the user of having to understand where the book was coming from and how to acquire it through credentials, and then how to read it. So 2 pieces of software were designed, one called Simply E, which was a layer for supporting the actual reading experience on a mobile application, and then Library Simplified, which is a management layer, more librarian-focused, which allowed the librarian to arrange the titles that the patrons had access to and manage their visibility in the mobile application for discovery. So this really remedied a lot of the secret token issues that users had, particularly if Adobe ACS was involved. So it was greatly simplifying. Also notably, it involved the first efforts to acquire content directly from publishers and move them into a reading platform distinct from the existing providers such as Overdrive and so forth. Eventually, the software had shown enough promise that a decision was made to make an investment in it, thanks to the James L. Knight Foundation. And the project transitioned to an effort at Lyrasis, and with the help of DPLA, was rebranded as the PALAS Project. So academics are, of course, very different than public libraries, and we face the same kind of a very dark warren of reading platforms. Nobody wants to do the same thing, it seems. There's no common user experience. And discovery traditionally has been extremely difficult to integrate into any common discovery platform, whether it's a library catalog or some independent web interface. And as we all know, the many different license permutations are further complicating both for the users as well as for Well, as we work on that, I'll keep talking.
Oh, that's weird. It's in there. Oh, there's back.
Okay. Yeah, loose cable. Okay. All right. So anyway, so license conditions are very complicated. Sometimes they might restrict content to just downloading a chapter at a time. They might have use conditions that are very frustrating for our user community and for the librarians and so forth. So this is a problem that causes a lot of different pain wrinkles through the reading experience as well as discovery experience. And our users are really difficult to solve for because they want to engage with text much more intensely than a traditional public library user. They expect deeper interaction as a student or faculty member. They want to be able to annotate. They want to be able to extract text. Perhaps they want to do textual analysis within a text or across text, and they want to do deep search. So all of these are challenges for reading environments. PALAS seemed to many of us in the academic environment a really good step in the right direction because it does have that mediation layer built into it. And the University of California, where I work, has been working closely with New York University and Columbia University, which preceded us in their level of interest, as partners in working with Lyrasis to advance use cases in the academic marketplace. And Cornell and many other libraries, particularly statewide groupings, are beginning to join us in this effort, creating a shared vision of what we are loosely calling academic PALAS. So UC is working across the system. We're just serving as a pilot. And the University of California is a complicated environment because we have a tiered licensing system. So there are many titles we subscribe to as a university across the campuses. Some titles may only be subscribed to by those campuses that have medical schools or law schools. And then there's some titles that are only subscribed to by one or two campuses because of specialized interests on that campus. So it's a very complicated licensing environment and a really good test case for working out the wrinkles in supporting an application like PALAS. We also decided early on not to try to be exhaustive in our pilot because there are just too many subsets of titles that would involve complications in terms of getting access to them. James will explain a little bit why that's the case. And we wanted also to be able to highlight specific use cases like texts that were selected for class use, so any titles that were in syllabi. We certainly want to elevate University of California Press titles, as well as audiobook titles. The next big step for us is trying to understand how users are finding the experience of working with PALAS and discovering titles and then reading them. From our experience, Davis is trying to produce what we're calling a cookbook of our experience. This is basically meant to be a loose guide that Lyrasis may ultimately maintain, but it would be for all academic PALAS implementers. So the document would include our understanding of the requirements for staffing and resourcing the project like this, going through that process of really understanding where the books are that might be eligible for incorporation into PALAS project, and that's, of course, as all things in a library, not a trivial exercise. And then any of those wonderful, oh, gee, you might want to consider or think about the following issues as we hit them, we'll also be trying to document. So we hope to have a draft of this out in the spring, but basically it's going to be a community project once it's out there as draft. It may contain some UC isms at first, but over time it will be more generalized. And one interesting thing that I want to note before I hand it over to my colleague James is that one of the great strengths of PALAS is that it frees you from thinking solely institutionally. And of course, at the University of California, that's critical because we are a network of 10 campuses. But even beyond that, PALAS enables you to take advantage of being able to group titles from any source that might be available to you. So in California, we benefited greatly from the State Library of California's work to create a common digital bookshelf for the citizens of the state of California. And the State Library acquired access to around 300,000 ebooks and audiobooks for the readers, library patrons, oh boy, of the state of California. And because those titles are available to PALAS to easily sort of apply or ingest for the University of California instance, all of a sudden, all the students and faculty at the University of California have access to 300,000 titles that the University of California itself did not have to license. And that includes, importantly, a large number of audiobooks that just are not a high priority for a university like ours. So this was a wonderful win that just comes about organically through the kind of technical infrastructure and network infrastructure that PALAS provides. This is just a quick screenshot of what it would look like through a web view. So this is, you can see that we're trying to create lanes, browse lanes for UC class titles, and below that you might see popular titles. These would usually stem from the State Library collection I mentioned. And then within a catalog, this is Alma, Primo, and this is what a title would look like, and it would say this title is available to read on PALAS. And then there would be links provided to move it to a mobile experience. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague.
Thanks, Peter. Hello, everyone. Good morning. My name is James English. I work at Lyrasis. I've been working on this project probably for the last 10 years. I started at NYPL on the Library Simplified Simply E platform and have come with the project and the technology over to Lyrasis to help make it available to more libraries and more types of libraries. So I'll skip some of the flourish. This is basically what PALAS is. It's a mobile e-reading app, but it's very different than the mobile e-reading apps you may experience in your public library or in your academic library if there is an academic ebook, mobile ebook platform. What is very unique and different about it is that it is not one of those apps that is just meant to capture your users for only the content you sell. It is designed to be content agnostic, meaning you as a library can source content from wherever you want, but your users only need to go to one place in order to read it. We don't take custody of the files. We operate in a distributed type of network where we integrate content to come directly off different provider services straight into the user's mobile device at the time that they want to read the book. The other things that we do is that we can handle the different permutations of how digital content is supplied to libraries across the ecosystem. We can do as easily as just implementing an open standard into those services so that the content can flow from their servers straight to the mobile app, or even take custody of the files if they need us to host them. In the instance, maybe a publisher is not a service provider for their ebooks and they primarily work through aggregators or some other form of logistical arrangement for their content. We were built in a public library, so we were built with library first principles. So accessibility, before there was a VPAT, before there was WCAG, we were building with Rhodium technology on this app back in 2014, before all of those standards existed, using technologies that would make it available. Basically strip away the old technologies that were just taking images of text like Adobe and presenting it to a user, but actually presenting real text so that you can interact with it. More importantly, have the assistive technologies of these devices read that content for those that need that type of assistive technology. The other thing is we use multiple DRMs. So unfortunately, that is a nature of ebooks. We can't just rely on one. We typically have to rely on many different types of DRM because of technology. So, all right, well, I'll just go on the kind of wing it. The other thing that we do, and I'll just talk into the microphone, I think it still works. The other thing that we do is that beyond just integrating with content and making it accessible, we preserve patron privacy. We require no login or credential from the user. We only redirect the user to the campus or the library's authentication system, where we can exchange a token to borrow content from a particular vendor on their behalf using some opaque token. We don't want to capture user data. We don't. It's built by design not to capture any of that material. The benefit of that is you can now make your users more opaque to service providers so that they're not trying to monetize your service, your users. Oh, thank you guys. Another important aspect is we even look at content that has no monetary value to a particular commercial vendor. So things like open access or public domain, we made great effort up front to make that content available side by side in the app. We don't monetize it, it's for free. In fact, you can go on today, go to an app store, download the content, and we'll make that content available to anyone who wants to use it. We don't even know who you are, but you can access this freely available material if you need. And that allows libraries who maybe want to use Project Gutenberg or some other type of open public domain repository or open access repository to be able to serve their patrons simply by pointing them to a place where they can go read that content. All right, so how do we do all this magic? Well, it's not easy. A lot of the infrastructure that you guys use today are built on those two little green boxes over there, two legacy metadata file formats. They were originally designed for print materials or physical items. And so this whole infrastructure that you guys operate, this twisted path, is what you're doing to manage that that file format in order to make that content available. You're navigating authentication systems, you're navigating different library service platforms to wrap around your ILSs, which weren't designed for digital content. And then you may even overlap that with something like an online public access catalog. Discovery layer is what they call it in public libraries. Or there may be an API integration if you're lucky. But what if there was something better? Well, we actually work with something that was better, and it's been around actually for quite a long time. 1 minute? Okay. It's called Open Publication Distribution System. In simple terms, it's a list of books. But what's special about this list of books, it has links to the books. It has links to the cover art. It has the different metadata, license metadata, availability metadata, accessibility metadata. And it's not specific to just to books. You can use it as an integration layer. You basically put it in front of an API, so you don't have to have brittle connections with APIs. You can just simply consume metadata and have basically hypermedia links to the content. And it is publication agnostic. Doesn't have to be a book. It can be an article, journal, video, text, albums. We use it extensively, not only as our integration layer into other content providers, but also for our own apps in order to integrate into other systems, or even just to talk to our back end, to our front end mobile clients. All right. My minute's over, so we're going to wrap it up.
So we just wanted to close with this sort of broader appeal to anyone who is crafting licensing with ebook providers. So this whole system that James just described and that UC is piloting really requires us to be able to work with books under, right now, relatively simple licensing. And the more flexibility libraries can provide external systems for reading and discovery, the better. So this is just a set of questions that we would appeal to librarians who are making these content acquisition choices to consider as they're drafting those. So will the provider allow systems to link directly to titles? Will they allow you to download complete titles? Can they be read on another platform like Lyrasis Palace? Can they be hosted or moved to another trusted platform and trusted by the publisher? Can they Do they have the technical means to provide an OPDS catalog feed? Can they provide EPUB, particularly, which has accessibility support, or PDF with text layers? And are they following accessibility standards? So with that, we'll leave you, and unfortunately, I have to get to the airport, but James will be able to stay around to answer your questions as they come up at the end of the session. Thank you so much for your attention.
So, my name is André Gaul. I'm the managing director of EMS Press, the publishing house of the European Mathematical Society. With me here is Kuma Bowling from SIAM, director of publications. And we're going to talk about equitable access through unified effort and practical approaches to the ADA in mathematics in particular. So yeah, in mathematics, you may ask, is there actually a problem? And here I give you a problem in mathematics. So this is a nice problem. It's the Navier-Stokes equation for describing fluid motion. And as you can see, this is clearly also a problem for accessibility, actually. It's already a problem for a mathematician to digest this. It's very hard to read, and so take away, for example, vision or partial vision, then this becomes ever more complicated. So the challenges in mathematics with respect to accessibility, and I should say for mathematicians with disabilities, because of course you need to have some baseline understanding to digest the content at all. But so we're talking about mathematicians with disabilities and not making the content accessible or understandable for everyone. That needs training, of course. So the two biggest challenges we have in mathematics are, of course, formulas. So here you can see a simpler formula. That's the heat equation for heat distribution. Still quite complex. So in order to figure out what's going on, you need to have you need to really maybe read several parts of that a couple of times. And complex figures is the other challenge that we face. Here is an example of a solution of a partial differential equation. That's from a book published by SIAM. And I want to talk first about formulas. So this, I recognize this is small. I don't expect you to read all of that. I just want to give you an impression of how formulas can be represented. So up in the left, you have, maybe I can actually zoom in or something. Yeah, I can. So here we go. So in the top left, you have the LaTeX source. So LaTeX is the typesetting system that is used in mathematics basically everywhere. And it has a quite concise way of writing formulas. So this is what authors typically use to write their formulas. Then there is MathML. So you can see this here. This is an XML representation of formulas, and so this is all about the same formula that you saw on the previous slide. So, and the MathML has 85 further rows. So that's not something that you would like to write or read, but as you can see, it's quite structured. Then there are other outputs like ClearSpeak, for example, so a text representation of that formula that can also be then read out by assistive technology. And here's a Braille representation using EuroBraille. So let me zoom out again. Go to the next slide. Maybe I'll leave it zoomed a bit. So here. That's an overview of what we have seen before. I just want to highlight two rows in here. The first row with a LaTeX code is used by authors and quite concise, but it's not well structured and not navigable. So this is quite important when you want to work with formulas. On the other hand, MathML is very well structured, and it's really good for assistive technology. You can navigate, you can go levels up, level down, and walk through a formula. And it can be generated from LaTeX in many cases. The downside is it's very verbose, but you should not read that as a human. You should have a machine or some tool process that and make this available or accessible to you in the form that you need. Yeah, and for the speech and braille representations, those are probably best generated by the assistive technology that the user has. So because then you can do this dynamically and, for example, only have a specific part of a formula being read out to you, and then you move on to the next row or to the next fraction or whatever you have that you're looking at. Then moving on to accessible figures. The big challenges here, I think this is shared across the industry really, but mathematics usually comes by default with complex figures, and colors and their contrast are an issue. So you should not rely on just using a color to transport information. Line types and patterns should also be used to convey information, and obviously alt texts are a requirement for formulas, for figures. And here is just an example alt text for that figure that we saw before. And if you read it, it has a reference actually to another part of the text. So that's something that we came up with, that usually a figure should be described properly in the text already. So there should be an understandable text for that figure. And so what we do here is we reference this part of the text, like with a tag. So the reader can go back and forth between the figure and the text explanation in the main body. And I would hand over to Q.
All right, so good morning, everyone. Hopefully you've got a sense from Andre there of the complexity of what we were trying to achieve there, and the further you dig into it, the further you realize how nuanced all of this is. So what we realized early on is we as publishers and with our technology vendors, we can create alt text and we can come up with something for this material, but we quickly realized we absolutely need authors to be involved, ideally writing things like alt text, but at the very least approving what we as publishers are going to add for users that need these accessible features. So we were all kind of working separately, and then we were talking and we decided to come together as a group of non-profit society publishers in mathematics. So the American Mathematical Society, European Mathematical Society, EMS Press here, as Andre is representing, London Mathematical Society, and myself at SIAM, which is the Society for Industrial and Applied Mathematics. And our aim really was to make sure we were all asking authors to do this, the same core principles, and to try and create a culture or further develop a culture that when authors, faculty, students are writing their material up, that they're already thinking about accessibility in how they're creating this figure or how they're communicating the information. And many faculty members, as you all know, are already dealing with these things with their coursework and the online modules, so hopefully it won't be entirely new to them. So we are finally, after many months of work, we hope in the next few weeks going to be able to publish these guidelines for accessible publications for authors in mathematics, and so we will obviously share that very widely. And this slide is really to talk about, call to action, if you like, that if any of you are librarians who are involved, either yourself or colleagues who would be interested in seeing those guidelines, do contact myself or Andre, and we'll add you to the kind of distribution list. Or if you know of groups that we should be definitely hitting with these guidelines so that they can then amplify the message, that would also be useful to know. And also if you work with any patrons, any faculty or students who are dealing with some of these vision issues or whatever it might be, as you read the guidelines or as they read the guidelines, it's going to be iterative. You know, we've tried to capture everything, but there's 100% going to be things that need to be finessed and improved, and we need to understand better. So any feedback from the community is warmly welcomed, and we will update the guidelines as we go. And then for any, if there are any publishers in the room, I think I spotted a few here and there. If you would like to talk to us about how we came together as society publishers to actually come up with these guidelines, the dynamics of that, and some of the nuances around particularly accessibility, then do feel free to reach out to us. As I say, the more you dig into it, the more you realize, okay, there's no one definition of what you can't say. This is now accessible. You know, there's always a spectrum of what you're going to do for any piece of content. And so I think with that, I think we just have our contact details there. We're in the app, on LinkedIn, et cetera, et cetera. So I think with that, I can hand back to Betsy, right? Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, go ahead, take a seat. So for our next presenter, they are joining remotely. I'm looking for the technical people in the room to help turn that on. Hey, there we go. There's Kyle.
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
And you can see my slide.
Yes, we can. All set.
Excellent. So thank you so much for having me here remotely. And I'm sorry I'm not in the 70-degree weather that I saw forecasted today. It's very cold up here. So I'm missing my Charleston time. However, I'm talking today a little bit about an article that I just published less than a month ago called Beam Me a Book, Scotty, and apologies to Star Trek for borrowing the thing, but it's about highlights from this article that explores how libraries can use Section 108 to support equitable remote access to preserved works through something called virtual access rooms. And in case you want to actually read the article, because this is only 10 minutes of fun that I get to share with you today, I made a bit.ly called Beambook. And this is a deep dive into Section 108 in the Copyright Act, which is a specific exception granted to libraries and archives, which I refer to often as library superpowers. Let's dive right into it. Then the problem is obviously access barriers. When we think about traditional reading rooms, right, places where scholars and researchers and patrons and the public and et cetera can go, they sometimes require long distance travel. They provide physical presence, which can exclude people with disabilities, with limited means to provide transportation, or they have caretaking responsibilities, right? And so all of these are slightly ableist, classist, and outdated. And the purpose of copyright, certainly, and we've heard the courts talk about this many times, is to promote the progress of science and the useful arts. If we could beam a person there, that would be much better, but we don't have that technology yet. So instead, imagine if we could beam via channel that is remote and secured a book instead of that person, thereby replicating the process that occurs when they arrive at the library. They go to the reading room, they sign the patron agreement, et cetera, they sign the reading room rules, et cetera. If we could beam them this, well, then we're providing access. And certainly the idea of virtual reading rooms is out there. For the purposes of this paper, since I found in my exploration that patrons are no longer just reading in these virtual rooms, they're listening to audio, they're using digital objects, they're watching AV works. I kind of thought that this phrase would be good because you cannot have preservation without access, and these are two core functions of the library. And current technology allows these VARs to employ digital controls that approximate the limitations and restrictions in the physical reading rooms. And again, that digital analog to the physical reading room is the idea behind this. The VARs extend the idea of traditional library space into the digital realm, something we've been doing in the library world for decades. With access, however, that is structured like the physical reading rooms, but authenticated, secure access, preserved, rare, damaged, and other works that are in the library collection, but available remotely. Now, again, Section 108, if you're not familiar, is a very large section in the Copyright Act. And it is basically the library and archives. And if you don't know this superpower, this is the engine behind document delivery, preservation, access, interlibrary loan, digitization, and much more. Each one has some sections on it about technology in the library. Now, Section 108 matters a lot because specifically it authorizes us to reproduce and distribute copies for preservation and access. It specifically does that. And it supports VARs in this statutory framework because secure, authenticated remote access doesn't make works publicly available or outside the library premises. And that's the key statutory clauses in 108B and C that address these. So for those of you not familiar, 108B and C says you get to make, as a library, a digital copy of an unpublished or published work under certain circumstances. And the limitations that are added to B and C by the Copyright Act says not available to the public in that format outside the premise of the library. Now let's just interpret the public for a moment. The Act does not define the term to the public perfectly, either for this section or for other provisions of the Act, right? There's the public distribution right, public performance right, public display right, but it's not defined as what to the public is. So my question that I asked was, can a library or archive serve a discrete user community distinct from the public at large, right? Maybe it's faculty, students at a university. Maybe it's patrons of a public library using their special collections or local history room. Providing off-premises access to digital copies may be permissible under Section 108 in certain situations. And this interpretation is formed by the fact that even if the meaning of to the public in other sections is more expansive, here it seems to mean something else entirely. Public generally means open, generalized access. If I upload something onto the internet, or anyone can walk in for any reason and just grab it, right? That is something. The law distinguishes between public availability and restricted use. And VAR served registered patrons under supervision, just in the same way it serves registered patrons physically, right? They have reading room agreements, library patron agreements, access agreements. All of these can be delivered also digitally, securing this. And so, you know, if you want to think that I'm just coming up with this idea, actually, there was the hair's breadth of this idea in the Register of Copyrights discussion document about Section 108, which was released in 2017. And of course, you know, this suggests that VARs are neither on the premises nor outside the premises, but have this other category. So the discussion document here, which I quote from, provides an example in which copies in digital formats may be accessed by users remotely for a limited time by one user at a time, right? So this already exists. The federal government has looked at this. So although these copies are not on the premises in the same way a book will be, they're not outside the premises either. And that's actually what the language says. You know, a book is lent to somebody and taken home by a patron. That's certainly not on the premises. But this report says, well, if it's tethered in some way, as long as the remote access is still tethered to the library, right, such as through an online portal and the patron cannot download it, then it's clearly not outside the premises, right? It's sitting here, the original book is here, the manuscript is here, whatever it might be. It's on the servers, which are housed here, right? Libraries are already providing access to works in a way that falls into this category. Some have been using analog works, using a remote meeting service like Zoom or Microsoft Teams. I've explored many of these different. But it seems to be that if we're interpreting not outside the premises, premises need not mean own physical walls. When we do our copyright first responders training across the nation, this is one of the questions. I ask them, what do you think premises means today? Right? Certainly, historically, premises may have referred to physical buildings, but libraries today maintain virtual spaces. A controlled virtual access environment is legally within the premises, and it functions as a digital extension of that premises. That's why interlibrary loan, for example, moved from physical to digital at some point. That's why e-reserves moved from physical to digital at some point. And it's not a big surprise that the benefit here is really not to the libraries, but certainly it is, but also to the patrons themselves. This expands equitable access, something that we're facing very seriously in the libraries today, but also in our partner patrons that need access to these materials. And especially for those that are disabled or rural researchers that can't get anywhere easily, we have the power of the internet. And VARs help libraries fulfill their mission by ensuring physical barriers do not prevent intellectual access, and especially during crises, disasters, and as some of my folks discussed with me when I was shopping this paper around in the Weissman Preservation Connector, they're like, this also reduces the handling of really, really fragile and rare materials that we have that we might not even let in into a reading room, but the scholars still might want to access. Now, there are risk factors that we can use to mitigate all of this. Just to be clear, VARs are not about free distribution. They provide secure, time-limited access. One of the strongest reassurances in the virtual access rooms model is that orderly library-controlled access replicates the scarcity and exclusivity, which protects the market for works as well. In traditional lending, physical reading rooms impose natural limits, right? Only one person at a time can use that rare manuscript, use that book, use that material, and the usage happens under supervision. VRs extend the same control digitally. Access can be time limited, one user at a time, and restricted to authenticated patrons using the technology which is already there. Multiple libraries have piloted various modes, and there are a lot of technological solutions out there. And this means that there is no uncontrolled or mass distribution occur, which is, again, the point of Section 108. This orderly access model prevents the uncontrolled sharing and downloading that people fear from online access in general. It also encourages cooperation between the libraries and the patrons by maintaining attribution, tracking legitimate uses, or even generating usage data that can inform future preservation partnerships. So in short, when access is managed under library rules and technical safeguards, the market for the work remains intact. Everyone can still sell, license, and monetize, but libraries can fulfill their public mission of preservation and equitable access. Now, the path forward here is, I have noted that a lot of folks have done this, maybe not through the lens of Section 108. This is what I am arguing. This is not fair use. This is not for sale. This is something special and unique just to libraries. I believe they are legally defensible. I would invite you to read the paper, but also ethically necessary. We have to modernize the ability for the library to continue to reach the space where our newest patrons are, right, in the digital space, and while still embodying the public mission of copyright, promoting the progress of science and equitable access. I realized that I only had 10 minutes, so I didn't run over. If you want to hear me talk more about this, not just a very long article, and for those of you that read it, thank you. But if you want short, more snappy copyright topics, I have a Substack where I talk about all this called Copyright Fight Club. Please join us on there at any time. And thank you for allowing me to present remotely today and share my ideas with you.